Hello, everybody in the world. This is my first video for my channel that I'm calling Victorious. I will tell you my testimony and how I got to the point where I'm at now. I'm sure many of you who are searching will have searched for vaginismus testimonies, painful sex testimonies, how to overcome that kind of thing. So basically I have vaginismus. And I've had it for almost 2 years, a little over 2 years now. And I too have searched online to listen to people's stories, and there's lots of good stuff out there, and but I wanted to come at it from a Christian angle. I love God with all my heart, and yeah, I just didn't feel like there was a lot of resources out there for women of faith who love Jesus, and how do we go through this struggle while trying to be, you know, have a godly perspective, be a godly wife. How do you balance the disappointment? Marriage was supposed to be awesome and now it sucks because you can't have sex. And just the pitfalls with the disappointment, the frustration. If you're seeking treatment, you can kind of go a number of steps forward and a few steps backward, and that's really discouraging. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of dive into my testimony as a Christian, and how I ended up where I am with vaginismus and going forward. So basically I am the youngest child of a family of 3 kids. I grew up in a small town in the prairies in Canada. I was just, you know, playful, worry-free, very creative. I've always been into music and art. I became a Christian when I was 5 years old, and you know, I had to ask God into my heart a whole bunch of times to make sure that it took. So that's great. Yeah, I didn't really have much going on when I was a kid. I will touch on something that is very important in a bit. But basically, I grew up always knowing I would have premarital sex. I just knew that it would happen, and I didn't conceive any other way of going about it. I grew up in the church. Like, I've been going to church since I was like a fetus. I always loved God. I grew up in the church. I've always loved God. But the church always just said, sex is bad, don't do it. And that was it. That was it. I went to a very traditional evangelical Mennonite church. Nothing was really talked about sex. It was just very negative. Just don't do it. Also, my parents were pretty silent on the issue of sex, and so with a lack of narrative, what is going to fill that narrative? And that is media, lies from the devil that were spoken into me from very young. And I went down the road of sexual sin like since 14. So it was up until I was until I was engaged and married that drove me. Like, basically the devil had his claws deep inside me in the sexual sin territory, and I didn't know this when I was younger, but looking back I can recognize what role generational sin plays, as well as sexual abuse. No, I was never actually sexually abused, but something happened in my life that brought those feelings into my life, where it may as well have been. I'll explain. And so anyway, the door for Satan's lies was just blown wide open, and I knew when I was born into the world, the enemy already had his grip in me in this area, and he had authority, and I was born like a slave to sin. Not to say that I didn't make a choice in committing my sins, but now I understand where the strongholds have come from, and this knowledge has allowed me to have grace for myself and forgive myself in my journey of healing. So understanding generational sin and the role of spiritual warfare is big, and being able to forgive yourself and let that go. So yeah, when I was 14, I started going down that road, and I had boyfriend after boyfriend, and ended up losing my virginity when I was 16. And it was around this time where I started getting into music quite heavily. I play guitar, write songs, I was recording albums and stuff like that, and I was very driven. This is what I was gonna do. So anyway, I began dating boys, and I also did a talent show that was televised, and I got pretty far on that, like top 16. And I'd moved to Toronto, Ontario, which is like a big city in Canada if you're living under a rock. And I pursued music there. And so in Toronto, you're kind of an island, so that was hard to maintain any kind of purity. I didn't have much accountability. I did go to church there, but I would club on the weekends. I'd go clubbing with my church friends, and we'd get drunk, and that was interesting. So not a lot of accountability. Then I moved back home in 2012. Not a small town, a bigger city, but close to home. And I started dating a pastor's son. And I thought, this is good, you know, he's gonna be good, he's involved in church and leading a Bible study, and his dad's the main pastor guy, like he's gonna be a good guy. And I put him on this pedestal, and basically he really made me feel like old, used up garbage because I wasn't a virgin. And this was really difficult, and it just added fuel to the fire, because what happens when you're a Christian, you love God, and you don't want to sin, and you want to be pure, you want to save this for marriage, but for whatever reason, if you have a predisposition to sexual sin or generational sin or something that, like, it's just like this, it draws you. It's so hard to say no if you don't know how to, like, break generational sin and war against that, basically, in the spiritual realm. And this is your predisposition, you just get sucked into it. It can be very easy to get sucked into it. And what happens is you hate your sin. You don't want to do it. But you're so tempted that you give in, and you cross the line. So how far can I push it? Can I push it, you know, let's just go this far, and then let's go this far, and then let's just go all the way. And after you feel like garbage, and you feel so shamed, and you don't want to do this thing that, it's against your beliefs, it's against your principles, like, why am I doing this? This is not what I believe in. And so then you feel the guilt and the shame, and then you try to stop, and then it's the cycle. It happens again. There's the temptation, the bargaining, the pushing the boundaries, let's do it, and then you feel like crap, and then, so it's just this cycle that becomes very negative. So sex is extremely negative. So I developed this thing where it's like, well, A, sex is bad, don't do it. That's what church told me. And then if you do it, it feels terrible. And then you have to push God outside of sex, because you know that God's not in it, because it's outside of his design. Then you have to push God away. So you just have to put God on the back burner so that it's okay that you're doing this, and you're not going to feel convicted as much, and you end up just numbing that conviction. So God's pushed aside, and it's a very negative thing, and it's like the cycle. That's what it was like for me. So this boy, making me feel like crap for not being a virgin, saying I would more likely to cheat on my husband when I was married, and like, what did I have left to give because I wasn't a virgin anymore. This was all really difficult, and it was a very horrible time of my life. And anyway, so just things like that. Devil just kept throwing lies at me like crazy. when I got engaged to my now husband, I met him, and his story is pretty similar. Like, both struggled with sexual sin. So it didn't take long before we were struggling in that area. But when we got engaged, we said, okay, no more sex, no more this until we are married. So 10 months later was when we got married, and we actually did abstain, which that in and of itself was amazing, because I was like, this was such an ingrained thing that I just did. It was like a roller coaster, you know. I'd get onto a relationship, and I would just ride this roller coaster that was the same. And then I would get off that roller coaster when the relationship ended, and the next time I met somebody and got in a relationship, on the roller coaster we go. And it's like this track I couldn't get off of. But when we got engaged, I was like, hey, this is my last chance to be able to say to God on Judgment Day, Jesus, look what I eventually, like, I did do it. I abstained when I was engaged, and I know that it's we can't earn our salvation, but I just wanted to be able to say that God, I do love you, and the proof is that I was obedient. The last chance I had, I was obedient. So 10 months of being engaged, and I mean, being engaged is stressful. You're planning a wedding, and the anticipation is building. We thought, you know, we're saving this for marriage now, and our wedding night's going to be blessed, and it's going to be awesome. But on our wedding night, it was impossible. It's like, it felt like he was hitting a wall. And I was like, what in the world? My body grew a wall or something? Did my vagina, like, close up or something? Like, what is happening here? This is super painful. It's like, it like literally is like an inch in there, there's like a wall. I can't, it's not happening. And I was devastated in that moment. I was like, God, like, what the heck, man? Like, we were doing it right. We were, what's going, I didn't understand, and I was really upset. And luckily my husband is a physiotherapist, and he said in school he took a little bit on pelvic floor physio, and he thinks that this is called vaginismus, so I should call a pelvic floor specialist in my city. So I did the next day. Like, we're on our honeymoon, I called them up, I'm like, this is an emergency, I can't have sex. And so they gave me some exercises to do, which I did. Like, I did about, we flew for about 5 hours to our wedding destination, or our honeymoon destination, and I did Kegels, like, the entire time. And we had some very interesting attempted sex, and it was kind of successful but painful. Anyway, it's got a little bit better. And then it just got terrible again, to the point where it was like, hey, like about 9 months after we got married, I was like, hey, no, I can't. And so then it just stopped, which was in April 2016. So it stopped there. I had never gone actually to the physio once we got back from our honeymoon. I just thought, it's a bit better, whatever, it's fine. Really should have gone. Definitely go to a pelvic floor physio. They are specialists in the muscular area of the pelvis, and they're going to know way more about it than your doctor or gynecologist. So I highly recommend going to a very senior pelvic floor physio. Go to them. Anyway, I did try to go to a pelvic floor physio, but she wasn't very well trained. There is a weekend course you can take, or there's like an extended master's. She had done the weekend course, so nothing really got better, and my insurance ran out, so I was like, hey, I'll just wait till 2017 in January when my insurance is back. So fast forward to then, it's now almost been a year since I've had sex, and I started going to a pelvic floor physio. That was the most senior pelvic floor physio in my city. And I fast forwarded a little bit. Let me rewind. In the summer of 2016, this physio was really good because she suggested I start going to a therapist. So I did start going to a therapist, and also to get the Vaginismus book. So you can go to vaginismus.com, I think it is. I'll put a link below, and you actually get a workbook and a journal and a DVD, which is very interesting. Definitely watch that by yourself. Big bush. I'll just say that. 80s bush. Anyway, yeah. So I started working through the book, and there's this section called Mind Over Matter, which is like turning over every single rock and every single stone that could potentially have led to this thing. So, while going to my therapist and working through this book, that took a good 6, 7, 8 months. That was for me. Some other people can go through it like in 2 weeks and they're good. But for me, it was like, I didn't realize I had a super negative association to sex. I didn't realize I had anxiety. I didn't realize certain things. So as I was turning over every rock and stone, I was able to kind of target things. And then being a Christian, this is the part where your personal relationship with God really comes in. For inner healing, you need Jesus. You do. So you have to turn over every rock and stone and figure out where this could have possibly stemmed from, because that's important to know, because vaginismus is a physical reaction, but it's also very mental and emotional. So basically, I realized there was a circumstance that happened when I was little. This is very personal and difficult to share, but I feel as though I need to share. When I was little, like 4, I discovered that, oh, if I touch myself here, it feels nice. And as a 4-year-old, you're not thinking to yourself, I'm going to masturbate. This is all about sexual pleasure for myself. You just think, this feels nice. Like somebody giving you a head scratch. Whatever. It feels nice. So I was at my cousin's, and apparently I was teaching her how to do the same thing. So my cousin's mom was furious, and she told my mom that I couldn't come over anymore. This is a story I was told, that this was horrible and couldn't be. So my mom freaked out because at the time there was a girl that had been molested in the community, and I was her friend, and my mom was concerned, so she thought possibly I could have been molested for some reason. And I don't blame my mom. As a mother, you do what you do to be able to sleep at night and to get clarification that no, this didn't actually happen. So she wanted to take me to a doctor to get a physical and a therapist. So, and we came into the city because we lived outside of the city, and it was one right after the other. So as a little 4-year-old kid, I went to a therapist, child therapist, and I don't remember what they talked about, but I know I was alone in the room with this therapist and talking and stuff, and I just knew this isn't normal, this isn't what kids do. And then I went to a doctor, and now my memory, it was a male doctor. I don't know, I was young, but I was naked on a table, and this doctor was looking at my parts and talking about me, and I just remember feeling really dirty and weird and ashamed, and like I didn't want to be looked at like that. And so that left the door wide open for the enemy to come in and tell me, like, yeah, you're dirty, you should be ashamed, your parts are dirty, there's something wrong with your parts, like your sexual parts, like you should be ashamed of those, you know. And I don't know, just crazy stuff. So I ended up feeling very anxious about anybody being able to see that situation down there, and that carried through right on to present day. Kind of getting over that now, but yeah, so that was something I discovered. So I had a fear that my genitals were dirty and that I'm dirty. And also being young, you know, being bombarded with the media and reading Cosmo and stuff like that. It was just, I was told, have sex all the time, have it lots, have it often, never get enough. And the church told me before marriage, sex is wrong, just don't do it. But then after you're married, gangbusters, it's awesome, and it's supposed to all of a sudden be great. And it's like, how do you make that switch? It's so strange and so jarring, right? I dated guys that, one particular would like confine me against my will in his bedroom. So that was lovely. Just a string of really negative relationships. Like being used and not good stuff. Used and abused. Never like physically abused, but abused in other ways. I've been concerned about body image because I love my mom to bits, but she's had some negative body image things, and then that kind of, when you're a little girl and your mom talks about her body and she needs to lose weight or whatever, then you just put that on yourself. She's like, whoa, if mom needs to lose weight, I need to lose weight, and I need to like be careful. And so there's like a negative body image, negative self-esteem. Yeah, just, you know, kids are mean in middle school. I got called daddy long legs and like chicken legs because I was thin and tall and a little awkward and gangly. So basically all of those things commingled into this big fear of sex and this negativity to sex. And so when I was married, finally I was like, oh, now I don't have to worry about sexual sin anymore because I'm married and it's all good. But just because you get married doesn't mean everything gets better and it goes away. It's just you push it under the rug and you just let that kind of, that's in the past, you know, deal with it. So for me, vaginismus was God's way of saying, okay, we need to deal with this stuff and let's like take it out and like examine it and like I'll speak my truth into it. And so basically God really forced me to deal with a lot of these things. So one tool that was great for me was therapy. This disorder is definitely psychological. So all of that fears and anxieties, I wanted to find the cause. Yeah, I discovered I had anxiety about my family, my body. I'm easily stressed out about things. And I thought initially that the vaginismus was a punishment for my sexual sin. But I have realized that it's actually the direct consequence of my sin. Basically, I made the conscious decision to separate God from sex. It's everything I just described is a result of my sin. Like that guilt cycle is a result from my sin. Pushing God outside of sex is a result from my sin. All of these things that would happen. So these things cause my vaginismus, but it's a result from my sin. So having a negative association to sex is because I had premarital sex and felt really guilty about it. And that caused a negativity about sexual intimacy. So it was like the cause is my sin. So that was a revelation. And God, it's not like he was like, I'm going to punish you, but it was like maybe a discipline. I'm going to discipline you, but it's for the good. Because if this hadn't happened, I would have never have known to turn over that rock, turn over that stone. Wow, I have anxiety. God, walk with me through that. Speak truth into me through that. So where does God fit into all of this? How does he fit into it, right? So I was just saying how so God really used vaginismus as a way to force me to deal with things from my past. So when I was a little girl, you know, where was he, you know, and when I was in these abusive relationships, you know, where was he in that, and what is the truth? I've been fed these lies my whole life, but what is God's truth? And how does he see me and all of that? So in February of this year, in 2017, I went to this thing at my old church called the Empower Retreat. And they discussed like spiritual gifts and leadership in the church and things like that. And while I was there, God showed me this picture of myself, and I was running away from something, but I was running towards, I can only assume was Jesus in this picture, and I was wearing this multicolored robe, and I just had just joy as I like flung off these old robes, and underneath was like a pure white dress. And I was just so joyful, and I knew that that white dress meant that was purity, right? And so that was really encouraging. I also, at that retreat, I decided, you know what, I had always held on to these things, right? Like I gave some of my heart to God, but not all of it. When I was young, I saw people at my church, like I switched churches when I was 14. I started going to, it's called Southland Church, Southland Community Church in Steinbach. And people were like getting set free from like porn addictions and gambling addictions, and healing, and marriages being strengthened, and lives being changed, and like all of these amazing things were happening, and people were just like surrendering their lives to God. And I was like, that's awesome for them, but I can't do that, because if I do that, then I can't have a boyfriend, or I can't have sex and stuff. So I held back, and I could never tithe because, well, I can't give my money because like I need my money. And so there were things I held back. And at this retreat, I just said, okay, God, you know, I'm tired of holding on to all this control. And so I just said, I'm going to start tithing. I'm just going to test you in this. I'm going to give you my finances. So I surrendered my finances. I also was always terrified to like lift my hands during worship or do anything physical. And I just said, no, like I'm just going to worship you, and I'm going to just get over this fear of man, and I'm just going to put my hands in the air if I feel led to, right? Like that can be powerful. Or like just a stature of surrendering, like, God, you can take it all. And I don't know, something happened that weekend in the spiritual realm where the devil had held me so tightly in these areas, and I just gave him up. I just gave them over to God, and it was like a domino effect. And I remember at one time I was at Bible study like a week after that, and I was just telling the girls what happened when I was younger, because I had told them about my vaginismus struggle. And they didn't understand it necessarily, but I said, you know, they're like, do you have any idea what could have caused it? And I was like, well, I have this negative association to sex, and, you know, I've believed certain things, and I told them about what happened when I was younger. I talked to my mom, and I asked her details. When I was a little kid, did I ever go to a therapist, and why? And she explained it, and so I told them the story, and they prayed for me, and I had this spirit of fear, you know, and we prayed against the spirit of fear, because I was afraid to go to physio again. I was afraid to start really trying again. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of trying, and I was kind of stuck in this spot where I couldn't move forward with my program. And so they prayed for me, and they were like, hey, you gotta pray for yourself. And I was like, okay, I really gotta go to the bathroom, and then I'll come back into this living room, and I'll pray for myself. And I was on my way back from the bathroom, and I felt I wasn't alone in that hallway. There were some spirits, and I felt like, it almost felt like spirits were kind of like grappling for me. It was really weird. And I like sat back down, and I was like, I feel like I'm under spiritual attack right now. Like, I've never felt this, but I feel a presence, and it's dark, and it's weird. And then I just lost it. I started bawling my eyes out. I started hyperventilating, and I don't do that ever. And that was my first time ever experiencing like really intense spiritual warfare. And so the girls came, and they prayed over me, and I prayed over myself, and I said, you know, spirit of fear, you're not allowed to be here anymore. I am a child of God. And I just like stood up with the authority given to me by Jesus, and I said, the same spirit that rose Jesus from the grave lives in me, and I cast you out. You're not allowed to be here anymore. Holy Spirit, would you come? And it was powerful. So I was just released, and I was able to continue on in my journey of pursuing healing. So then I started walking with God more closely, and started learning about like worship leading, and because things had moved in my heart, and I was much more conscious of the spiritual battle that we live in, and I was more like, hey, well, I gotta be careful about what I'm watching and what I'm listening to, because I don't want to inadvertently give the devil an open door. So things really changed for me then. And since then, I've also gone to this thing called a set-free retreat, where you pray, you just confess lots of sin and lots of prayer and learning about spiritual warfare and things like that. While I was praying into my past and a relationship that was particularly awful, I prayed and I was like, God, you know, where were you in my sexual sin? Like, what were you, like, hating me? Were you, oh, that heathen? Like, what's your heart towards me? And what's his heart towards us? And this goes for, I think, everyone who's struggled with sexual sin. This is his heart. And it can't just be his heart towards me. It has to be his heart towards everyone in the same boat that I was in, where I hated my sin and I hated it and I wanted to do better, but it just had me in its grasp. And his heart towards me, he showed me a picture of himself from Revelation 19, you know, where he's on the horse and he's like the faithful and true rider, and his eyes are shining and he's got a double-edged sword and he's like in his glory. It's describing Jesus when he comes back again, and like that glory, because he's a king, you know, he didn't stay a broken man on a cross, he didn't stay a baby in a manger, he has risen and he's in his full glory again. And so I was picturing myself in this relationship, you know, making out on a couch or whatever, and it was like in that moment where I just hated myself, and he showed me that he was there in the room and he was on his steed and he was like in fighter mode, because he was like, no, daughter, I don't want you here, I'm gonna rescue you. And in this vision it was like I was here and he was between me, and then the sexual sin was on the other side, and he was like, nope, and he grabbed me and he put me on the back of his horse with him, and he trampled sexual sin really easily, and then we rode away together. And so it was a very protective heart, a protective spirit, and yeah, it was just like, he's gonna fight for me, and like, this isn't what I want for you, and was like a father, you know. And he rode away with me to this green pasture where it was the same place that I pictured, where I flung off those old rags, and it was just peaceful and we were together, and it was amazing. And so I thought that was really awesome. And we just walked, and this has been a place that I go to sometimes in my quiet time with God. And at one point I saw like a fountain and a garden and everything like that, and the water in the fountain had been kind of murky and dirty, but now the water was clear, and you know, it was beautiful. And I knew that this fountain represented my purity, and how I let men come in and dirty this water, and it was dirty. And now I had fully surrendered to God, and I have fully repented of the past life that I had. And this is the beauty of my God, is he'll renew, you know, he redeems. And this fountain was now pure and the water was clear, and it was amazing. And so I ended up going to this set-free retreat where we confess sin, and it's just a bunch of people like making the conscious effort to pursue God with everything. So it's kind of like, let's just deal with our crap and move forward. And basically I got another vision of this fountain, and this time Jesus was there with like a filter, like one of those little filters you use in like a little, like, I don't know, pool or whatever. It's kind of like this little filter, and he was like filtering it out, and then he was placing like lilies and flowers and making it so beautiful. And I was like, God, like, what? This is new. I've never seen flowers in that fountain before. And I asked him, like, what are you doing? And he said, I'm making it more beautiful than it was before. And I was like, before what? And he said, before your sin. And I thought, I was perplexed, because I was like, How do you make it more beautiful than it was before it was untouched? It was perfect then. How can you make it more beautiful than before, you know? And then these verses came to my mind, just popped into my mind. It was, you know, the story that Jesus is saying there was two men and they were both given an amount of money. Neither one could pay it back. One owed a little bit and one owed a lot. But then their debts were canceled. And who do you think loved the one who canceled the debts more? The one who owed like a whack, or the one who owed a little bit? And I wasn't sure what that was, so I Googled it. And this is the passage that came up. And this is again like touching our heart and healing from the inside. Like, our God is the only one that reaches into his creation, who loves us enough to even like enter into a personal relationship with us and actually give us like revelation about his love for us and how he sees us, even though we're such sinners, but he still loves us. So let me just share this with you. This is in Luke 7, starting in verse 36. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from the city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner." Then Jesus answered his thoughts. "Simon," he said to the Pharisee, "I have something to say to you." "Go ahead, teacher," Simon replied. Then Jesus told him a story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other, but neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? Simon answered, "I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt." "That's right," Jesus said. And he turned to the woman and said to Simon, "Look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and there are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. But a person who is forgiven little shows only little love." Then Jesus said to the woman, "Your sins are forgiven." The men at the table said among themselves, "Who is this man that he goes around forgiving sins?" And Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." What God is this? Right? And he sees the heart, and he knows how much I hated my sin and how I wept over my sin and I hated my sin. And I was just ready. I needed his forgiveness. And so when he said, "I'm making it more beautiful than it was before," and then related it to this passage, it was kind of like, the person who is forgiven little shows only little love. But the one she has shown much love because she's been forgiven more. So that kind of made sense to me, where it was like, my love for you is so much more now that I understand how much I've been forgiven. And so to me that totally correlated, and it just heals your heart, and you know, my God loves me, my God doesn't judge me, he's not going to throw that first stone, he just says, "I love you. Come to me. I love you, and I want to protect you, and I will fight for you. And you come with me on my horse. I am a king, and you come with me on my horse," which is a crazy honor. It's just nuts. So I just want to encourage all the women out there who have had sexual sin in the past, and now either they're married or they've developed this vaginismus, and it's not a punishment from God, but it can be such a blessing, because it causes all these pains and these hurts in your heart to come out, because you need to deal with these things in order to be cured. So that has been my experience with walking with my God through this process, and with everything, it's like, okay, so I have insecurities about my body. what is God's truth. He can speak truth to your heart. You can be like, well, God, where were you? What was your heart towards me when I was in my sexual sin or whatever? And it's only God who can take head knowledge and turn it into heart knowledge, and that's what's going to heal you. So I really encourage you to get alone with God and in your quiet time and work through this. So also you got to get this book. You just have to get it, and it comes with inserts as well. And I'll get into that more, and I'll go through my hang-ups and things like that, and what does God say about sex? The church says just it's bad, don't do it, but what does God say about sex? Why? Why sex? Why did God create sex? Also, an incredible resource is, it's called Passion Pursuit. It's a Bible study all about sex, written by Julie Slattery and, I'm sorry, I forget her name. I'll put it down there though, and that's definitely a good resource to work through as well. There's also varying degrees of it, so like I think it's 1 in 100 women have pain during sex, and then like 1 in 1,000 actually have like legit vaginismus. If you're in the States, there's also a treatment center in New York City that says in 2 weeks you can be cured, and so apparently they do a really good job working with you to cure you, and I'll put a link for that as well in the description of this video. So basically where I'm at now is there's 6 dilators that come with your kit, and they go from little small ones to big ones, and I'll do another video showing you those. And you just have to work through these and get your body used to each size, and then continue to go up. So I'm halfway through those dilators. Some days are good with them, some days aren't, and it's a frustrating thing. It's been a long journey for me, but I'm gonna keep on going, and I will get into more stuff with you. But this is like the first long video, and I appreciate you listening to me. And I just wanted to say, if you don't know Jesus, you don't have a personal relationship with God, and you've listened to this and you're kind of like, whoa, that's intense, and what's that about? Watch some more videos. If you just want that, you can pray a very simple prayer, and I might put a link there about, I want to know more about Christianity, or I want to know more about Jesus or something. But really, it's really simple. You just have to realize, like, okay, I have sinned. I've gone against the design that whatever. I've sinned, and I've fallen short of a standard here. All you have to do is just say, God, like, I want to have a relationship with you. I'm sorry for what I've done in my past, but moving forward, I want to know you. And if you're pretty skeptical, you just say, God, Jesus, if you're like legit and you're real, just show me. I'm gonna give you a week. I'm just gonna like, just show yourself to me. I dare you. Like, just show yourself, because the Bible says that if you seek with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, like, if you pursue him, he will show himself to you. So simple, you just say, God, like, I'm sorry, I've committed these sins, and I want you in my life, and just show me if you're real. And you can go from there and experience like the amazing peace and the joy that you can have walking this road with Jesus. I can't imagine going through this journey without my God and my Jesus. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching it all the way through. It might be a little choppy, sorry if it was editing. I didn't really plan this out. So honestly, I just felt like God was saying, you need to share your story for like a long time. So here's me just being obedient and saying yes to God. And hopefully this touches somebody somehow. Okay. Thanks so much, and just keep checking back for more videos, because there's far too much for me to go into in one video, and I'll post more. Thanks so much.